See, my thing is, I walked into the Disney Channel offices and I walked into the office of the Disney Channel president and I said, I want to make history. And that's what this is. Hey everyone, welcome to Legroom. Today we're going to be doing the Jake Iceberg so that you can get to know me a little better. I wanted to do something to give context to like who I am and what this is that didn't feel like 20 questions. I don't like doing that on first dates. I certainly don't want to do that here. So I found 5 categories of like art, culture that I could give examples of what I love and kind of what make up me. Call it a pantheon, a canon, a collection, the Criterion Collection, wishes. These are my takes. So if you don't like them, that's fine. Share what you like. And then maybe I can think you have bad taste. And then maybe we can just all have bad taste. So let me know what your picks would be. And here is the Legroom Iceberg. Right, so 3 movies to get to know me. Now you can look at a list of like 80 of my favorite movies of all time on my Letterboxd, but I decided to go through like genres, comedy, drama, thriller, which Letterboxd says are my most watched. And I picked ones that I feel fit into those categories and then also represent types of movies I love. So the first would be Amelie, the 1999 Jean-Pierre Jeunet art house film that is just a masterstroke of visual storytelling, of quietness, gentleness. You fall in love with this character and you just watch her become a woman. It takes place when she is in her early mid-20s, and then seeing the death of Princess Diana on TV inspires her to take charge of her life by helping other people, and in that she develops a sense of love for herself, which then allows her to develop a sense of love for others. And it's French. Oh, it's so good. Something that I really long is when I get to like meet someone and introduce them to Amelie. That is like a thing I've built up in my head for 4 years now. And it's also a musical. Listen to the West End version, not the Broadway version. The Broadway version was the building blocks, but the West End version is like beautiful. Next movie, I would be lying to myself if I kept this off the list. So for drama, I have Molly's Game, starring Jessica Chastain, written and directed by Aaron Sorkin. Now, a lot of people would argue that this movie is not great. I'm obviously not one of those people. I think this movie is quite great. This is a film adaptation of the Molly Bloom novel Molly's Game. She was the poker empress who then got investigated by the FBI, and it was a whole thing. I love this movie because it is riveting from start to end. I love this movie because it has this kineticism to it that only Aaron Sorkin can infuse into his storytelling. So obviously the dialogue is like music. Jessica Chastain is truly my favorite actress of all time. So seeing her here in something that is just transformative in glitz and glam, while then also like the dirty, grungy side of her is awesome. Idris Elba is amazing. There's a Crucible parable about it. Like, it's wonderful. And I watch it like once a year, which is a rare thing that I do for movies. And it is a comfort film, which is completely moronic, but it is a comfort film in the fact that I can put it on, put my phone down, and then let the entire movie play without picking up my phone, and then I'll like feel better. Love Molly's Game. And then the third, also, this just wouldn't be being true to myself, even though this is a aggressive choice to put on, which would be Christopher Nolan's 2020 misunderstood masterpiece, Tenet. I picked this movie because it represents my love of both Christopher Nolan, the thriller genre, and kind of like the bro-y movies. I had Lord of the Rings on here for a while. I had Seven on here. Any of the David Fincher movies. Tenet, I will do a video on this because I'm so passionate about Tenet. And I don't even understand Tenet, and I won't pretend to be someone that understands Tenet, but I understand how Tenet makes me feel, and that is all Christopher Nolan cares about. I got to see this last year in its intended form in like the IMAX 70 millimeter, which I'll talk about in another video. One of the most amazing scores, great performances by John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, and Kenneth Branagh, who I think is a fucking rock star in this movie with his accent. It's such a cool James Bond like movie. And if Nolan never makes a James Bond movie, I'm damn glad we have this. I was on vacation in Miami this past summer, and Tenet was on the hotel TV for a moment. I was getting ready for the night, and I was like, then sitting down, I was like, oh, okay, it's the first airport scene. I have to watch this all the way through. Okay. And then I take a shower, and then it's the car chase scene. Okay, you have to walk. It's so good. Love this movie. Love this movie. Okay, albums. So here's my take. I think people take music too personally. If you wrote the music, you can take it as personally as you want. Me, I don't write music. I just listen. I also know what I think sounds good and what I think doesn't sound good. So that's what we're rolling with. I chose 3 genres that I feel really speak to who I am and what I listen to. So the first, because we're doing alphabetical order, of Monsters and Men sophomore album, Beneath the Skin. So of Monsters and Men is a Icelandic rock band that hasn't made an album together in like 5 years, and it's very sad, but they have released 3 albums. They're best known for their first single, Little Talks, off their debut album. But Beneath the Skin is a really special album to me because it's about love, but it's about self-love and not romantic love. And when you think about it, there are actually very few albums, songs, let alone albums, that are actually about that. The themes, it's about depression and the relationship you have with yourself, and it's all done on the backdrop of this stunning, note for note, sonic journey. The lyrics are beautiful, the singing is beautiful, the way that they use instruments and they produce the tracks, it's really wonderful. And if you haven't heard anything off this album, I highly recommend it. And for this album, they did visual lyric videos for all of the songs that are really stunning. So that's of Monsters and Men, Beneath the Skin. The next one, The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. I had a really big emo phase in middle school into high school. I don't know if that's like obvious about me or if that's something people would be surprised to learn. When I was 13, I went to Breaking Benjamin, 3 Day Grace. I went to like their concerts. Thank you to my Aunt Lori and my Aunt Lisa who took me to that. I chose My Chemical Romance over Fall Out Boy, but Fall Out Boy's Pete Wentz said in a quote, "Punk rock will never leave you." And that sounds so cheesy and it makes me sound like someone that I am not. But this theory of community in the punk rock genre is something that I actually really hold close. And I think that the style of music they make, and I think Black Parade with American Idiot as like standards for storytelling. This is truly a rock opera. We've gotten to see American Idiot on stage. I pray to God one day we get to see the Black Parade on stage. I have an entire vision of how it can be done. I have a Google Doc. Someone please call me. We'll make it happen. It's an epic album. It's as loud as it is sincere, and it's as biting as it is warm. There's so much to get out of this album, and it's followed me at every stage of my life, and I still always get something new out of it. And then third, I had to pick a pop girly, and this is where I didn't pick Taylor. I didn't even pick Gaga, and she is like my queen, I think, as like a person and as an artist. But the true musician that I like the most in the pop sphere is Sigrid, who is a relatively unknown Norwegian pop rock indie funk singer. Every song she's made is solid, like beyond solid. She follows in the tradition of ABBA and other Scandinavian acts that have come before her that just make this kind of music that is first an earworm, but then layered on under it is like brilliant production, and then layered under that it's just like great lyrics. And I went to a concert. She was at Terminal 5 a couple years ago, and it was one of the best nights of my life. I went alone, stood against a pillar drinking like one of those giant White Claws. Every song hits. And I would be disingenuous if I put someone else on this list. I also think the time that Sigrid came into my life, my good friend Skylar introduced me to her with her 2020 single Mirror. And that song, like I went on a journey with, where at first I was like, this is quirky and fun. And then I was like, wait, I love this. So Sigrid, I highly recommend, especially if you're a fan of like Carly Rae Jepsen, whose The Loneliest Time is one of my favorite albums. I think you'll really like Sigrid as well. Okay, so next is theater. And I've picked 3 shows that are accessible so you can experience them, but then also kind of encapsulate the past 12 years of consistent theater going and, 15, 16 years of obsession of theater. So the first is Cabaret, Candor and Ebb, always different and fresh. I genuinely believe it's the best written musical of all time. Eking out Fiddler. But Cabaret, when they wrote this, they certainly knew what it was like going to be and what it was about, but they didn't know how timeless it would become and how it would be able to span any generation and any journey and any performer that came across it, because you will see 1,000 performances of Cabaret. I've seen the show dozens of times, from the Mendes revival to the movies to the recent revival that I got to work on that's currently on Broadway. There's always something different, whether it's the director's vision, whether it's the actor's take. No one sings Maybe This Time or Cabaret the same. I did a scene study on those songs in college, and I spent an entire semester trying to correctly stage Maybe This Time, and I still don't know if I ever got it right. Amazing musical. So you can watch the movie, you can watch the Alan Cumming Mariner Chocolate Factory production on YouTube, and listen to the albums. Amazing. Next. My favorite musical of all time is Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I have the tattoo. I discovered this with the revival. I did Standing Room for Neil Patrick Harris. I didn't know anything about the show, and it knocked my socks off when Neil was in it. It was a tight 90 minutes, so the whole thing kind of just flew by and my eyes glazed over. But then I saw every Hedwig that was associated with that revival, even through the tour. I missed Lena, because Lena did like 3 performances as Hedwig, but in LA, and I'm not a traveler, so I didn't make it. But I even got to see Mason Alexander Park, who was the understudy for the role, and they did a production at the Olney Theater in Maryland that I got to go see. So I've seen everyone that was associated with this production of Hedwig, including John Cameron Mitchell. So this started off Broadway, became a movie, then came back to Broadway. Every version is slightly different, and I think that's what makes it brilliant. The movie is amazing. Either album you listen to is amazing. I actually think the off-Broadway recording is better, even though they remixed a lot of the production of the songs for the revival to give it more energy and more volume. But the story of Hedwig is devastating. It is hilarious. The songs are as good as the jokes, which are as good as the book, which never stops. It is a train that you get on at the beginning, and then if you don't yank eject, before you know it, you're like staring into a sea of the most insane strobe lights you've ever seen on a stage, wondering what is real and what is not. Watching the performer then reflect that back to you and kind of demand you to answer it for yourself. And then it just is like this big cathartic, beautiful celebration at the end. I can't recommend it enough. The movie, either of the albums, and legally I can't tell you to type in the show name on YouTube, but if you type in the show name Broadway on YouTube, you're going to have a good night. And then finally, I have Arthur Miller's A View from the Bridge, and I have this for 2 reasons, because I'm specifically talking about the Ivo Van Hove production that was on Broadway in 2015 that came from London's Young Vic Theatre with Mark Strong. So 2 things. One, Arthur Miller is my favorite playwright of his generation, but him and August Wilson, obviously. But what Ivo Van Hove was able to do with this production was put the prose front and center, and that's now becoming a cliche, but the way Ivo did it at the time was something they'd been doing in the UK and Europe for a while, but then came to New York and now is all you see. But there's a reason for doing it with this play and the way he did it, and you can actually watch it with the National Theater at Home subscription. This is not sponsored. Hey, National Theater, you're welcome to sponsor me, but you can watch it. So I don't even want to talk that much about the production since it is accessible, but it's basically like, what if we did A View from the Bridge without changing a word as a Greek tragedy? It takes place in like a 10 by 20 foot box, and there is nothing false. That was Ivo's quote there. He wanted nothing false about the production. So the characters wear like very loose costumes and they don't change. They don't wear shoes. There are no props. There's no set. There's no anything. There's the pivotal chair that for the end of Act 1, and then they cut the intermission, and then the whole thing is underscored by like Roman Gothic choral music. It's terrifying and electrifying, and it honors the text just as much as the original Broadway production must have. It truly is revolutionary in the way that it makes you rethink what the work is and how it can be relevant to today. I really don't like when people say this work is more relevant now than ever. It's reflecting to society. And I'm like, I hope so. I hope so. And B, you should be challenging, right? You should be really trying to challenge perspectives. And I think that that's what Ivo's production did without changing the intention of the show at all. So those are my 3 for theater. Okay, television. So I'm not going to lie, COVID did something where it rewired my brain that I cannot do scripted television anymore. It doesn't hold my focus. Theater is the best art form ever. Movies second, television last. I need them to get to the point, and I find it very hard to pay attention and get invested, even though that's like their whole purpose of running long. So nothing recent is going to be on this list. The Newsroom is my favorite scripted show of all time. It's Aaron Sorkin again, but it's an all-star cast. Jeff Daniels, John Gallagher Jr., Alison Pill. Very underappreciated show. It's criminal that so many people have not watched this, or if they have watched it, they don't talk about it. It wouldn't make sense in 2025 because what they did is they took actual events that happened, starting with like the Boston Marathon bombing, and then put it into the world of this like fictional news crew. I think it's electric. Its characters I end up caring about deeply because it's also so funny. And it's just a world I love living in. And I think the whole point, and this is the point with a lot of Sorkin's work, and especially work that Jeff Daniels does, is like, it's just that tries to challenge you and challenge the way you think. Next, I am not a big fan of 30-minute comedies. I know that that is a genre that people love. I did binge all of 30 Rock during the pandemic because that's my good friend Skylar's favorite show. So I have watched all of that. But other than that, I've never really spent time with a 30-minute comedy. That was until Superstore. This did something to me. I was roped in because of America Ferrera, who I just love. But then there is something about the comedy of Superstore that is different than the comedy of the other 30-minute shows. It built a world that felt so familiar, that it was welcoming, but I didn't feel like, oh, I don't need to watch that because I live it. It was like, no, I want to know more about these people because I actually don't live this. I go to Walmart, but I don't know the people that work there. And even though these weren't real stories, you still fall in love with the characters and the world that they build inside of this Superstore. I think they played their run beautifully. COVID really fucked with the ending, but they still nailed it to me. America Ferrera was a huge team sport in coming back to support the final season, even though she was supposed to have left. I don't know if the show would have continued without her, but I think they ended up wrapping it up perfectly. And it, like, the finale made me cry, and I don't get that emotional when I watch. Well, I get emotional, but I don't get moved to tears very often. And this had me sobbing. I love Superstore, and I've watched it like a million times. Same with Newsroom. I don't go back and revisit things, but these are shows that I do. And then finally, the best television show ever made, the best game ever played is Survivor. I don't even want to say that much more about it because I have recorded an entire episode with Tegwith, who is one of the heads of fandom of this show. I've been watching this show since I was 7, season 6. It is now, we are about to enter season 48, and it never misses. And even when it misses, it's still a great season of television. The show has evolved, the players have evolved, the way the show is produced and presented to you is better and different than any other reality show on TV, and that is what makes it special. There is nothing canned about it. There is nothing staged about it. It is constructed in the way that producers have to tell you a story and get you to be invested in characters. There's stuff left on the cutting room floor. They're on an island for 39 or 26 days. Of course, we're not going to see everything. So it's a brilliant exercise in both storytelling of a unscripted television show. Then it's also a game of mafia where you're trying to catch a murderer who ends up winning $1 million at the end. And then every season, depending on the cast, completely changes the game. Completely changes the game. You have some seasons where someone who would hands down win 99 out of 100 times gets voted out first because it was that one time. And what I love about Survivor is that. You can play could have, what if, you could play that game all day long. But for that reason, I love Survivor. If you have to start, you don't have to start at season 1 and watch chronologically. I would actually highly recommend against that. There are maybe some fans that would say you should, but I really don't think you should. You can start literally wherever you want. I have an entire list that I will release with the Tegwith episode. I would just off the bat say season 37, David versus Goliath, my favorite season of all time. It is delectable. It is excellent. So good. All right, and we're nearing the end, so let's talk about books. So in terms of reading, I'll just be very candid about my reading practice, which is I read every night before bed for like 30 minutes to an hour, and I don't read prestigious things. I often read like what is on sale in the Kindle store and maybe what is a book that so many people are talking about you can't escape. In alphabetical order, though, this is going to seem very random. The first book is Notes on Directing, which was a book I was given in college, or I was told to buy in college, specifically about directing, but it is actually 130 Lessons in Leadership is the subtitle. It's by Frank Hauser and Russell Reich, and these are 130 pieces of, to me, vital advice on being a collaborator and a leader, and also just like a good fucking person in the 21st century. I adore this book. The lessons are succinct and clear. Like it's not very verbose. It just gets to the point. It's such an excellent book. I have it near me at all times. I really recommend it, even if you are not, I studied theater directing, and yes, this is for directors, but I think it's for anyone who wants to be a better collaborator or a better leader in their industry of any field. It's really wonderful, and it taught me a lot that I still use. Next up, in the summer of 2020, the book that got me really back into reading was Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles. And this was before it blew up. It was obviously years after it came out, but it was before it became widely available. And I know that because during the pandemic, I went to many bookstores trying to get a hardcover copy of it, and they didn't have it in stock. But this is a frank, queer retelling of the Greek story of Patroclus and Achilles, and it's beautiful in so many ways. And I'm not one of those people that learned all of this Greek mythology when I was in high school. Or if I did, I forgot, so I didn't know how it ended. And that wrecked me. Oh, destroyed. I'm so happy this book has taken off the way it did, and it's like a permanent fixture on the Target bookshelf. Because if I had seen this book on the Target bookshelf when I was 14, it would have changed my life. changed my life in its representation, its beauty, its authenticity. I love this book. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. And then finally we're gonna end it with The Song of Spider-Man by Glenn Berger. So this is the true story from the book writer of Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, the ill-fated Broadway musical helmed by Julie Taymor that was really rifled in controversy and strife. I mean, this show went through hell, and it ran for over 1,000 performances too. But it reached new heights that we had yet to see in the 21st century of the American theater, where they did like 4 months of previews, which is unheard of. That shows don't do that. And then the show closed and they revamped it. They fired people, the cast members and artistic members, and totally reworked the show into something new that kind of then let it continue on. And I think since it's disappeared off the face of the earth, which is very rare for a musical to do, to not have had a major remounting somewhere. They had wanted to do, like, I think they wanted to build a theater in Vegas, which it would have been great for. I think Spider-Man is, I was about to say Spider-Man is like a universal character, which he is. Like, everyone loves Spider-Man, and all the Spider-Man movies always make a lot of money. But I don't think Spider-Man is a character that you necessarily need to see on stage. I think the way they did it was really cool, though that technology is now much more common. This is a very fun fact to me and to me only, but the technology they used to make Spider-Man fly is now reused in the same theater by Harry Potter to make the Dementors fly, which is all stolen from Cirque du Soleil, which is the technology Pink uses to make her fly. So when you see those videos of like Pink get down, because at the end she does that fly around the arena for all of her shows, which I've gotten to see, and it's so cool. It's all the same technology. So this book, going back to the book, is a first-person retelling of what happened during the making of this musical. And I first read it as someone that was just like a super fan of the industry and like loved theater. And then I revisited it during COVID, having had a few years of experience under my belt of working in the industry. And I was like, this is what it is. I was like, people don't get it. You think Broadway is glamour and that so much is going into so many details, but at the end of the day, it's just like, oh, at 2 a.m. last night, someone decided they didn't want to do this, so we've now removed a $2 million set piece from the ceiling. So it's a fascinating portrait that, even if you're just like a fan of Broadway or curious about Broadway, is an excellent read. You don't even have to know anything about the musical. I think the writer would actually prefer you don't, because then he can inform you what he wants to. So I think we just did the legroom Iceberg. What a collection of things. You will learn many more things about me and things I'm interested in. Looking at this list, it feels like a pretty good overview of me. I would love to hear what your picks would be in these categories, and I would love to hear if you're interested in me speaking more at length about any of these. Like I said, we have a interview with Tegwith coming up about Survivor, which is really exciting, and there are some other hobbies that I'm hoping to get into and forms of media that don't necessarily fit into this list, but will be a bigger part of the show. Thank you all for watching or listening. Give us a follow. It is free. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.